Good afternoon or good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining this afternoon's webinar, which is all going to be about colour, all the ways we can manipulate and play with colour in Capture One. So very shortly, we'll dive straight into Capture One and have a look at that. For those of you watching on YouTube, please feel free to comment on YouTube. I'll be able to see your comments, so we can answer those as well. For those of you within the webinar room, please feel free to use the chat and Q&A. But just a couple of things about that. If you want to ask a question, helps if you pop it into the Q&A tab, because then it keeps it separate out from the chat. My colleague Diego is also helping out in the webinar room as well, and also on YouTube, so you might see some questions answered from him as well. If you prefer to hide the chat, if you're in the webinar room, you can do so, and then that will just give you a bit more space on screen as well. But otherwise, enough chit chat, let's get straight into it. So as I said, the whole purpose of today is to look at everything that we can do with regards to color in Capture One. Now that's pretty much going to be centered around, helps if I'm on the right tool tab, that's pretty much going to be centered around the color editor tool, the color balance tool, which is sitting just under it, and how that gels together with layers as well. So we do a little bit of layer work too. If you're new to layers, don't worry too much. We won't go into massive detail about layers, but if you feel you're getting lost at some point with the layers side of it, hold that thought, because next week we're going to be deeper diving into the whole layers side of things as well. So that way you'll be able to combine both sets of skills. Fantastic. All right, so what are we going to look at first? Well, let's start off simple and then dig into the more advanced side of things. So let's pull out our color editor tool and focus first on the basic color editor. Now there's 2 or 3 different ways that you can use this. All of them have their own advantages and different disadvantages. Can't speak this afternoon, but we go through each one and then you can make up your own choices. Now the basic color editor, I hope you'll agree, is fairly intuitive to use. You'll see that there's 8 different color patches and a global color patch, which is selected here by default. But very simply, if you pick on one of the color patches, straight away the bars change to indicate that color and what's going to happen when you push the slider either side of those. So obviously if we zoom into our chicken buddy here at the front and we pull the lightness down, that's going to affect the reds, as I've chosen the red patch. Very simple to understand. Of course, double click anywhere and that will reset it to 0. If you're not sure exactly which color patch makes the most sense, if it's a fringe color or if it's sitting between 2 color tones and you're not entirely sure, then the fastest way to do it is just grab the color picker right here in the corner, click on the color you want to edit, and then Capture One will suggest the nearest color tone as well. Same principle as before, grab the sliders to then manipulate the color. The hue slider gives you an exact idea of what's going to happen, as does the saturation slider. Simple. Now each of those patches can of course contain their own adjustments. So if I went back to the red and then drop that down, then that's going to retain the adjustments that we had. Alrighty, so what's the third way? So the third way is if you like, the most accelerated, speedy way, and probably the most intelligent way that you can use the basic color editor as well. And that's still using this picker, but it's what we call the direct color editor, because you target and edit the color directly at the same time. So if we just reset what's going on in the color editor, grab the color picker once more, and I'm going to click and hold just on this patch on the shirt. Now watch closely. So when I say click and hold, I mean I'm going to click with my mouse or pen and hold it there, and momentarily you'll see a 4-way cross pop up, which will then disappear, but I'm still holding down. So there it is. So click and hold and then disappears. And now we can either drag up and down, left or right, to directly manipulate the color that we clicked on. So look, even if I'm on the red patch and I click and hold and then start to drag, so if I drag left and right, that's going to control the lightness. If I go up and down, that's going to play around with the saturation, like so. And all I'm doing is dragging it up and down. Did I turn on my overhead camera? Well, let's find out and see exactly what we're looking at. I did. That's lucky. I thought I'd forgotten to do that. So really just looking over to the left of the screen, click and hold, and then all I'm doing is dragging left and right or up and down just to change those parameters. Now, what about the third option? Of course, because we've also got hue. Now, your settings might be slightly different to mine, but I'll tell you how to change them in a second. So if I hold down the Option key, in my case, and then drag, now I'm on the hue, like so. So now I can manipulate the hue. If I just do a couple of broader drags, you can see what's going on behind me in the background. And really, that's all there is to it. But distinct advantage here by doing it this way, the direct color editor method. Look above my hue slider, so I just wiggle the hue slider around. Notice that it's picked out 2 of those color patches. So this is another benefit, especially if you're on a fringe color, which might not be, you know, a perfect red, could be an orange, could be a purple or something like that. And then this way, Capture One can pick out the best adjustment. So if we flick between those 2 patches, you can see simultaneously some adjustments have been made to both those sliders. And yes, so good timely question from Earl. Says, if you've changed multiple colors, can you go back to a specific color and change it again? Then yes, you can. So I can just go back in to this one. If I wanted to reset or just change that, tweak it, then yep, I could do so as well. So no problem at all in that respect. So that is really a good advantage of using the direct color editor in that way, because it will pick out more than one patch. So it becomes very easy if we just reset everything. So the reset button will reset the lot. Click and hold. Say I want to make that a bit darker and up the saturation. T-shirt, I want to make that a little bit less saturated and lighter. So I can go in this direction. And even if I drag diagonally, then it's doing 2 sliders at the same time. So if you get really smart with your muscle memory, then you know this way is lighter and less saturated. If I go diagonally, then it's going in the other direction. So if you get super cool with your mouse movements, then it becomes very fast to edit color. All right, just check for a couple of questions. Does the hold and drag apply here? Vincenzo was asking, or also on other adjustments? It's only for the direct color editor, unless I'm forgetting something else. Yes, you can click with lots of other cursor tools and so on, but the click drag only happens with the direct color editor, but also with speed edit if you've seen how that works as well. But generally, it's just with the color editor. Okay, so, you know, a couple of quick examples. If we just go to our Kingfisher here, if we want to play around with the feathers on his or her back, wildlife experts can tell us if it's male or female. Then click and hold, and then I want to darken that down a bit, add a bit more saturation, simple, like so. So that's really the fastest way to do it. And of course you have that benefit of multiple color patches if need be. Now, by default, it's actually set up a slightly different way, but I change it to some extent. So by clicking on these 2 little sliders here, this will show me what each of the axis does of your mouse, pen, etc. So by default, I'm pretty sure lightness is set to the option drag, but I prefer to keep hue static because generally when I'm editing color, it's quite often it's just lightness or saturation, and I want the hue to remain static. And then by keeping the hue on the option drag, it means that if I did want to adjust the color, I'm not going to accidentally move it when I'm dragging my slider around. So that's my preferred way of doing it for sure. Now, what is the limitation with the color editor? Well, first of all, these are predefined ranges, but we've spent quite a bit of time in deciding what those ranges should be. So you'll find they're quite well targeted to skin tones without much separation, and a few other bits and pieces going on under the hood as well. But the limitation is that when you're editing a color, it's always affecting the entire saturation range. So if we click on this little box here, this will actually show you what each of the color patches does. So as we click through, you can see anything that turns to monochrome is not part of that color patch. So this way you can teach yourself a little bit exactly what each color patch is doing. So this one is tuned pretty well to the feathers on the back. Now you can edit those ranges. You can drag the dividers between the two. But I would suggest if you're getting to that point, then really you should probably put the advanced boots on and then start using the advanced color editor, because First of all, you have much greater control of the color range, and you also have control of the saturation range. So in this example, we are going to affect every saturation range of this color from the least saturated to the most. In the advanced color editor, you get a choice. So if you start thinking, oh, I'd really like to manipulate this, then it's time to move to the advanced color editor. So let's just switch collection, and first things first, we're going to go to our big scary table, switch to advanced. Let's reset that. And the big scary table really gives you an idea of exactly what happens in the color editor. Now, as I said, in the basic color editor, the choices or the ranges are decided for you. In the advanced color editor, it's totally up to you. That's why when you first go into this tool tab, it is completely blank. So of course, we can't see anything that's going on. The only clue that we have is there's this little color picket in the corner. So the steps really are based on choose the color range that you want, manipulate that color range, make the edit. So let's grab our color picker. I'm just going to click kind of over here, and then straight away something happens. You see a dot. That is the exact color tone that I picked on. So this spot here represents the exact color tone that I picked. The hard line, that is the boundary of the color that we are going to change in the immediate future. And then the fuzzy area, this is how it rolls off into the neighboring colors. Now it can be a very hard roll off or it can be a very soft roll off, but let's see exactly what happens. Now to visualize this range, that's actually pretty tricky. So how would we visualize that? Well, fortunately, there's a handy little button here called View Selected Color Range. So if we turn that on, you can see exactly the color that's selected as everything else dips to monochrome, which is not part of that selection. So now we can see what happens if I pull the range in this direction. Now we're going to start sneaking over to the reds. If I go in this direction, we're going to pick up the greens and so on. What happens if I drag from the center towards my pick color? That means we're going to cut out the lower saturated tones. If I pick from the outer of the circle towards my color, it's going to cut out the more saturated tones, like so. So that puts in the saturated tones, this cuts them out. Now if we zoom into this little patch that we made, probably a bit too much. If we zoom into this little patch, we can see if we relate this fuzzy area, again, this is how it's rolling off into the neighboring colors. So if I bring smoothness down to 0, that gets represented by a hard edge, and then we can see the same happen on our color chart. If we bring smoothness all the way to the other direction, then we can see it starts to bleed in the other colors. What is the benefit of that? Well, really the benefit is that if you have that hard stop, and we might see some examples, I think we will later, then you can start to see posterization in the shot. It doesn't look very nice, unless you really need to be super critical. In this direction, of course, it softens off, and that just gives us a better roll off into those neighboring colors. And then, of course, once you have your selection, let's turn that off, then you are, of course, capable, if we just zoom out a bit, of manipulating lightness, saturation, hue, and so on, just like we do in the basic color editor. But the whole point of this part is that you have the choice to have a very specific color pick, or you can do a very broad color pick. So we'll look at a couple of examples in a second. These two patches down the bottom, these simply show us how the color looked when you picked it and what it looks after your edits, with the numerical before and after as well. So red was 231, now it's 0 with our wacky corrections and so on. So that just gives you a visual cue to how the color looks like. Couple of questions. Martin says, is there a way to change the color option so that advanced is the open by default? There isn't, but it might be nice actually. I tend to, in the majority of times, use the advanced just because genuinely that's what I'm more used to. But that could be useful actually. That would be a nice convenient thing to have. Brian says, neat, is that new in version 21? Nope, the advanced color editor has been around for a while. It had a few under the hood improvements in version 12, I think it was, and a few other releases as well, where it's just more accurate, work better, and so on. But it has been there for the mainstay, but it's definitely one of the great tools. All right, so what does this mean in practical terms? Let's reset the nonsense that we've done here, and then let's take an example from Paul Reifer, who some of you I know were just watching his live edit on YouTube, which I rudely gate crashed. So a couple of things here. Now this is one of Paul's shots from El Capitan. There's no adjustments on it right now, so it's not how Paul would normally present it. So sorry, Paul, but I've just stripped it of everything so it is as it came out of the camera. And this place has a great phenomenon that the light hits a certain spot of El Capitan at some point, and then you get this lovely glow. Now, the benefit of the advanced color editor in this situation is that we can really target our adjustment to just the fiery glowy bit here, some of the rocks, and also the sky in the background. So what would our workflow be? So if we grab our color picker, I'm just going to click kind of around here. Capture One's going to give me a suggestion. So if we turn on view selected color range, everything is going to dip to monochrome. That is not part of my selection. So now I have some choices to make. I'm going to pull it this way because I want to make sure I get all the most saturated tones in as well. Now this was my exact picked color, as I mentioned. And if we go in this direction, what we can decide is, do I just want this bit? Do I want some of the rocks as well? If I go all the way out, it will actually start to pick up a little bit of the sky as well. So if I edit this and just throw in a bit of extra saturation and drop the density down, I'm going to do it more than we would normally in an edit, or certainly more than Paul would. And if we just pull this around, then you can see what's happening. So pretty much just the most saturated bit, include some of the rocks, pick out the sky in the background. Now you couldn't do that in the basic color editor because by default it would just include the entire saturation range. So this gives you an extra level of control over your picked color. And regardless whether you shoot people, landscapes, or whatever, doesn't matter. Just hold that principle in your mind, that if your color change is affecting, could also be you only want it to affect the lower saturated tone. So if we cut this out and I pull this down, then you see now it's going to have less effect here and put some warmth back in that area there. So it's really a powerful additional benefit to be able to play with the saturation range as well. So keep that in mind. There was a question from, oh, Brian, I misinterpreted your question, Brian. Sorry, meant the little button showing the range on the image. This one here, no, that's been there a while, but it's really useful. It's actually quite difficult to use the color editor without being able to view the selected color range, unless you put in some completely bananas adjustment and then use that as a way to fine tune, which you can also as well, but you might prefer to actually use view selected color range. So let's reset that before Paul sues me. But yeah, it's a really handy bit to be able to see that range. So we can have a broad range, we can have a very narrow range. So a good example of a broader range would be if we grab this shot. This is from Phil Penman. Let's just reset it back to 0. So let's edit this a little bit first. Let's open up the shadows to some extent and drop down at the blacks a bit. And let's just rotate ever so slightly. Whoa, not that much. Probably something like that makes more sense. Now if we zoom in and think we want to put a bit of extra saturation in these areas, basic color editor, again, it would do this area, treat this separately to this area, so it kind of makes more sense in the advanced color editor. Click on the color I want to edit. So in this case, let's pick out the arrow, turn on view selected color range and think, okay, I want to make sure I get the reds in as well. So I can just pull that until I get good balance. So that's now going to cover all those colors, but it doesn't pick out, of course it will pick out down here as well, but it's not picking out anything else. If we turn off view selected color range, it's not going to affect the other neon colors that we've got in the rain as well. So now if I bump up my saturation, I have to be careful because the red is right on the limit, and play around, then it's going to affect both of those color tones at the same time. Oh, good question from PD. What are those icons next to view selected color range for? They're just handy little shortcuts, really. So if we were to do this and I click this icon here, it automatically says expand the entire saturation range. So whatever I have it set, even if it was like super skinny like this, and I said click, then again, entire saturation range of my picked colors. This one here doesn't invert. So once again, if I just reset the adjustments we did, so we've currently selected our reds and the arrow and everything. So if I say invert, that's going to do the opposite of that. So now if I play with saturation, that's going to change the saturation of everything except my pick color. So that just does an inverse, which is really, really handy. I saw a question earlier, it was from James, I think, who was asking, can we do this on a layer as well? And yes, and we're definitely going to come to that as well, because there will be times where we also hit a limitation of this tool, because we can no longer, no matter what we do in terms of making a very fine range, we're always going to have the issue of interfering with some other colors. And that's probably a good time to talk about that. Before we do that, this is just another example of where we can just about get away with using the advanced color editor without having to get into layers as well. So if I grab my color picker and click on his coat as an example and turn on view selected color range, then everything will dip to monochrome again, which is not part of that selection. Now that's including a fair amount of his skin tone at the moment. So if I was to start making adjustments, see, it's affecting his face as well, which I might not want. So if we turn on view selected color range, if I pull that away from the reds, and this is the only point where you might have to move this point a bit, as if it will prevent you going beyond your picked color. But actually around there, that's cut out his skin tone pretty much. And the fluorescent band on the coat there, we could actually cut out because it's a more saturated version of his coat. And then if we turn off view selected color range, then we could play around with his coat to some extent without affecting his skin tone. But that's an example where we're right on the limit of thinking, can I achieve this without having to move into a layer situation as well? Often, rather than trying to be super clever in the advanced color editor and squeezing down the range and playing with smoothness, because on this shot we could also probably, if we pull the lightness down, if we pull the smoothness down, you can also see how that's affecting, because we are right on the edge there. So we might be able to balance it so it's just on the knife edge of affecting the coat but not the skin tones and so on. So yeah, rather than trying to be clever and sneaking around in the advanced color editor and playing with the range and the smoothness and getting frustrated because you can't isolate, sometimes it's much, much faster to just simply go ahead and do it using a layer. So let's go to passion fruit smoothie thing here. Let's just delete what we did earlier, reset the color editor, and think, okay, here's our shot. We've got some basic adjustments on there already, that's fine. We're working with our food stylist and they say, you know what, this is not quite the right tone, or it's a little bit too dark. Can you brighten it, edit the color and so on? Sure, no problem whatsoever. Of course I can do that. So we grab our color picker, click on our smoothie, capture one gives us a suggested color range. We turn on view selected color range, and of course, as this stuff is made from this, then it's very likely it's going to be the same color tone. Now I might be able to get rid of the grass out the window by doing that, but there's still a little hint there, so then I might have to pull the smoothness down, but then I'm starting to lose it a bit on the smoothie itself, and I probably need to come away from there. And you could spend a long time fiddling around, and I'm never going to be able to isolate this. So James, who I think it was asking, we can introduce a layer to just help us target our color edits even closer. Now if I reset that, we're going to grab our brush in the layers tool, and the good thing about this technique is that you don't have to be skillful or accurate at drawing layers. You're just looking to cover the area of the color that you want to edit in a kind of pretty rudimentary rough way. So we've grabbed our brush icon over here, and we're just going to do a mask. I'm going to right click to check our values. So nothing fancy, just a relatively soft, full opacity, full of flow brush. Press M on my keyboard to see the mask, and we're just going to cover it like so. The only careful thing is I'm not going to ditch into the window over here, but roughly something like that. So not especially accurate, not hard edge, none of that tricky stuff. Grab my color picker, make sure I am not on the background layer, I'm on the layer I just made, picking my color, don't even bother really adjusting this. So we've saved some time already, and now I can happily go ahead and I'll just do some dramatic pulls so you can see we're only affecting the color in that area. So now I could do what I wanted, tweak the hue to whatever direction that I felt was necessary, and job done, without having to futz around in the advanced color editor. Again, if we wanted to treat this guy separately, we could do another layer, we could grab our brush, we could just do a quick mask down here. Again, doesn't have to be accurate. Grab our picker, pick in this zone, and then now I could brighten that up if we wanted to, like so. So make the decision in your head. Should I spend time tweaking the range in the advanced color editor, or is it faster to make a layer and just have done with it? So if I give you another example, let's take our handsome guy here. Let's reset what we've done here. So he's got this nice gold coat. We might want to improve the color of that a little bit, but being a warm tone, probably likely we're going to affect some of the wall as well. So if I grab my picker here and then just drop the lightness and boost the saturation, it's also having an effect over here. So what I would do, once again, reset that, grab my brush, probably make this a bit smaller, M on my keyboard to see my mask, and then not being massively critical, just do a quick mask like so. Grab my picker, pick on the color tone, probably make sure I've got the entire saturation range. So just click the icon and then drop my lightness down and open up the saturation. The only thing I might have to be careful of here is it affecting his skin tone? So let's turn that layer on and off. Yes, it is. So I could grab an erase brush and then just take it out, just so we're not messing up the skin tone like so. And the nice thing is now I've got my brush, I could paint that adjustment in anywhere else. Now it's probably not going to affect the door in the background here, so I can be pretty loose and then just brush in that adjustment like so. Again, not really being massively critical about where I'm brushing. And there we go. So easy. And again, not particularly accurate masks, but that's way faster than trying to mess about playing around with the range in the advanced color editor. And we can do it that way to show you the mask. You can see wasn't massively accurate, just roughly in the right zone. Okay, Leon, good question. Can you explain how you would match color across multiple photos? For example, you have an object in 5 pictures, and in one picture you change it to a specific color. How would you make the object in the other 4 pics the same? 2 choices. You can do it by eye, or you can use the normalize tool. Don't have a good example I could show you, I don't think. But if we look under normalize, basically what the normalize tool will adjust white balance and exposure to match color. So just consider that it might not always be suitable. But if this guy was wearing the same jacket in another shot, I would simply pick his color. Oh, sorry, wrong button. Pick. Use the pick normalize cursor tool before applying normalization. I would. Oh, I need to be on the background. Do excuse me. So pick normalization color. Try again, David. Have I just? Oh, there we go. It helps if you actually select it. Or am I being an idiot? Cancel. Pick. Doesn't want to play. Let's go to another shot. Or is it a whack-on thing? I thought I had it picked. Hang on, let's try from this one here. Pick normalization color. There we go. So if I pick my normalization color, then Capture One will record that. and then you can go to another shot with the same object, Leon in this case, and then I would just click there and Capture One will tweak the white balance and exposure to match those RGB values. So Alan says, please do a tutorial in the normalize tool. That's a good idea actually, because we haven't, or I personally haven't done one, so that's something we should do. But thanks for reminding us, Leon, because that's an often underused tool. Alrighty, okay. Alex says, I think it's easier to create a layer from the color selection and brush out the unwanted areas. That also works, and we're going to look at that too. But sometimes that's just an extra step. Like if I did, in this case, create mask from color selection, it would pull out his jacket, it would pull out the wall, and I'd have to go erase, 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 erase. Whereas I know on this shot, I could just do a really quick and dirty mask and do the color edit change. So, but it's a choice that you can sometimes make. Okay, what are we going to talk about next? Advanced color editor. I think we pretty much covered. Let's just hide my viewer a second. It'll remind me when I look at the shots. So we've done those. Yeah, if we look at our surfy dude. So let's move down, because there's a few things that we can do in here which kind of bring this all together. So let's reset that shot. Let's put our color editor away so we've got a bit more space. So first thing I'm going to do with this shot is it's a bit on the dark side, so let's open up our brightness and exposure a touch. I want to open the shadows a bit, but I don't want to lose the atmosphere, so let's bring down the blacks ever so slightly as well. And let's just warm it up a touch as well. So a couple of things in this shot that we could talk about with color. One of them is the surfboard. It's fairly dominant, where really we should be looking at him as the subject. And secondly, he's got his hoodie up, or it's a headrest, or it's, I don't know, it's a sweater over something, which kind of makes him look like he's got this odd woolly halo around his head. And we could also do a bit of skin tone correction, which we can talk about as well. And I think I've got another, I will have another example, I didn't put it in this folder, of how we can use the skin tone tool as well. All right, so first thing, surfboard. So if we use the color editor and do our pick, like so, that's going to show us, make this a bit bigger for now, that's going to show us our color range. If we turn on view selected color range, it's likely we're going to get some beard going on in there, and also some of his skin tone as well. Now I could squeeze that down, so I'm just finding a good spot for the color editor. If we squeeze that down, we can almost get a fairly good selection of the surfboard. Surprising, I thought, but there's still a little bit of his hint of his skin. So if we went in that direction, we cut out the lower saturated tones and we do a pretty good job. So now if we play with the lightness, we've actually done a fair job of isolating that without the need for any layer at all. So if I want to drop the saturation down and just darken it down a touch so it's not quite as offensively red, then we can do so. What we could also do, if you consider, you know what, I can see there's someone with a skin tone in the picture as well. There's likely to be a clash, so we could do a quick layer there and just pick in the surfboard. In this case, we could manage it by squeezing that zone down. But there's two choices, of course, that you can make as well. So that's step one. So we can do another color editor pick. I don't think I mentioned, but we can do up to 30 independent picks. So we're going to grab our picker and we're going to go on his woolly halo around there. Let's look at the view selected color range. Does it benefit us to do that? Not really. So there's no point pulling it out if we're not going to use it or if it's not going to have any effect anywhere else. And let's drop our saturation down. So it's just going to desaturate that area so it's not quite as distracting. And how are we doing for time? We can probably squeeze in a quick skin tone edit as well. For this guy, he's got a little bit of skin tone variation like all of us do. And what the skin tone tab does is really allow you to pick a target skin tone and normalize everything else around that point. So we do it on this shot and then I'll grab a bigger shot where you can see maybe a little bit easier what's going on. Now when you're using the skin tone tool, it's better to do it on a layer because quite often there's a color clash, if you like, between the skin tone and other elements in the shot like lips, makeup, eyeshadow, and so on. So it's best just to try and start off with a layer mask. So on this shot we do a quick and dirty method. On the other shot we do something a bit more sophisticated. So I'm going to grab a brush and we're just going to simply paint a mask on his skin tone areas like so. Again, don't have to be massively accurate. You could consider, if there's makeup that you don't want to affect, cut their eyes out. That sounds terrible, sorry. Erase where the mask is on their eyes, just so it doesn't affect anything there. Now the process of using the skin tone tab is a little bit more different. So there's still our color picker, but we've got an extra bank of sliders here called uniformity. So the top 3 sliders work in exactly the same way as they did in our advanced color editor, by changing the picked colors hue, saturation, or lightness. No difference from there. What we need to do with the uniformity slider is first tell Capture One where on our subject the desirable skin tone is. Where is the target skin tone? So I'm going to say probably not his nose, because that's going a bit red, not his cheeks. So it's probably somewhere around here where it's a bit warmer. Now as soon as I click, we get our suggested skin tone and our color range. Now as we did a mask, I'm not going to worry about making this broader. Why am I making this broader? Because what happens when we move these sliders is that everything in that triangle, I just drew a square, everything in that triangle will get transformed to the picked point. So as soon as I drag hue across, you can see all of his hue changes to that picked point. If we did saturation, lightness, we get bad Instagram look. So again, we should have some nuances, so we don't necessarily want to go all the way, or if we did go all the way for full uniformity, we can also back off our opacity in the layers tool as well. Now you can really see what's going on, because if you remember, I just said that everything in this zone will be transformed to the pick color. So you can dial in the skin tone you want. So if I went over here, you can see exactly what this tool is doing. Everything in that zone is being normalized to that point. So whatever skin tone color you want, you can just drag that spot to it. Okay, let's pop our color editor tool away. Come out of this shot. So what did we do? We had our few basic background adjustments. In our advanced color editor, we fixed our surfboard, we fixed his woolly halo, and then on this layer we did a skin tone edit, so that's in our skin tone tab. If we turn on before and after, then you can see before and after like so. We're going to come back to this in a second for a quick look at color grading, but to show you a more fancy method of skin tone editing, let's just find this shot. Sorry, show in library. Actually, while I'm here, just going to eject a couple of hard drives which are making a noise in the background. You probably can't hear them, but they're bothering me, so let's get rid of those. And sorry, I want to say show in library. Okay, there we go. That's what I was looking for, because there should be a shot, Nev, this handsome chap. So let's find Nev. So a little bit more skin tone variation in him. So let's just boost his shot a little bit and just brighten it ever so slightly. So if we look at Nev, I think this is a 100 megapixel shot, which is asking for trouble. Again, we've got some skin tone variation over his face, but that's fine. I might want to keep a slight nuance of that. So what's a slightly more refined way of doing it? Rather than brushing a mask over his whole face and then applying that blanket same adjustment, that's a bit crude. So how can we do it in a fancier way? So first of all, I'm going to say new filled adjustment layer. So if I press M on the keyboard, then that's a layer over the whole shot. We're going to do the same as before. I'm going to grab the picker. I'm going to decide what skin tone I want to have, probably over here, I would say. I'm going to drag this to be a fairly wide net, if you like, to catch all the duff skin tone. And then now I'm going to be super aggressive and drag hue all the way across saturation a little bit and not leave the lightness because I like the variation. Now, if you're not happy with your pick, don't forget you can move this around to get the skin tone that you like. Now that's obviously affected the entire layer. So if we turn that off and turn that back on, you can see what it's doing. So what I want to do is now clear this mask and just brush it in where I want to have it, like a skin tone correction brush. So now if I get my brush, make it a little bit bigger and softer, I'm going to turn the flow down. So it just means I can build it up more in areas that need it. So let's just go over his nose like so, a little bit under the eyes, a little bit under the eyes here, like so, and then let's go down probably a little bit just under the chin there to cut that redness out, like so. So this is a much more nuanced, finer way of doing it. A little bit up here, a little bit over there, and so on. You get the idea. So rather having that kind of clown mask over the face, we can really target the skin tone adjustment. I'm just pressing M on my keyboard. So just M over here, M like so, just to turn the mask on and off as a shortcut. So that's a more critical way of doing it, which is if you want to get the best result in terms of the image edit, that's the best way to do it. Okay, all right. The software is phenomenal. Oh, thank you. I'm glad you think so. I mean, the skin tone tool is brilliant because any of you can use it. It's not difficult. Just give it a try. I have confidence in you that you'll be able to use it to its maximum potential to do what we just did with this shot and with our other surf dude. Would be incredibly difficult in Photoshop Affinity Photo, or at least you would need a specific skill set to be able to do that. Any of you could leave this webinar now, please don't, and do this on any of your shots where you needed to do some kind of skin tone correction without needing some kind of advanced retouching skill. So that's great, it's very accessible. Okay, a quick note, Mike says that the skin tone tool can be used for sky in landscapes. Yeah, pretty much. If you think of any color range that you might like to normalize, like a sky, which isn't perfect, a background paper in a studio, a seascape, a city, or something like that, you could still use the skin tone tool to pull those colors together. So it doesn't have to be skin, but it was designed, well, primarily, it was designed to be skin. It was kind of by accident that we discovered it worked pretty well on other stuff as well. So that's great. Let's check my schedule and see what we're doing. Okay, so we did our, let's go back to that collection. Say goodbye to Nev. Oh, color range masking. So this was a suggestion that came up earlier. How are we doing for time? Good. Just about enough time. That came up earlier from, sorry, I can't remember who suggested it. Alex, I think it was, who said sometimes it's easier to use the color editor to create the mask, which is definitely true. And I've given myself a really easy task in this because her outfit is of course a very dominant color and there's no other colors in this shot that match it, or is there? So let's see what happens. So if we grab our color picker and click on our shirt, then Capture One gives us our suggested color range like so. Now let's float out the color editor again. Let's say on this particular shirt I want to make it a bit more contrasty, boost up the sharpness a bit because it's a great texture, you know, increase the clarity or something like that. I wouldn't want to increase the clarity on the whole shot, but I might like to do it just on the shirt. So if I turn on View Selected Color Range, then Capture One tells me exactly the range I've got. But before I get too hasty and convert this into a mask, which is an easy one-click operation, if I just pull this lightness around, you see we're actually picking up a bit of the background as well. So what I would want to do is just cut out those lower saturated tones. We don't need those. All I really need is about that much. So now we've got a very good color range selection of just the shirt. So how do we convert that to a mask? Let's just sneak this across a bit. With the three dots in the top right hand corner, click on those, create mask layer from selection. So that's essentially saying take our blue tones that we've picked, and whatever is in that range, convert that into a mask. So if we say click, like so, takes a few seconds. And let's just put away our color editor. We are done with you for now, and press M on my keyboard. Now you can see where the mask is, like so. Now to help visualize these masks better, you can say display grayscale mask. And what the grayscale mask does is show you white for the masked areas and black for the non-masked areas. And that's a pretty good mask that I would have struggled to draw myself. Now we can edit this. There's no reason why we can't change it. So if I grab my brush, there's some of those black lines. If I press M on my keyboard to come out of the mask. Sorry, excuse me. Let's try that again. Display mask, like so. Sorry, fingers aren't working today. So you see we've got these black areas which weren't picked up by the color editor. So it's very easy just to grab a brush. Helps if your flow is turned up, and just, if I wanted to, add that to the selection if I felt it was necessary. A second thing that you might find useful when sorry, mine's gone blank. When you're using this method to create masks is just to clean up the edges a little bit as well. So right now, if I zoom into a few more percent, you can see it's quite crunchy. It's not a very sophisticated mask. So what you can do on any layer with any mask is right click and say refine mask. So that's an edge refinement. So on 0, the mask looks like this. And if we gradually sneak up the radius, it takes a few seconds to process, then it will just blend those edges better. So it won't be such a fall off from the masked to non-masked areas. It will spread out gradually to those spots. So now if I say apply, and then let's get rid of our mask. Now my fingers are working. Then we can do what we want to just this layer. So I could obviously lighten it a bit. We could add some more contrast. We could add a bit more clarity. As it's a great fabric, we could add a bit more sharpness into it and so on. You get the idea, but nicely restricted to just that color pick. So that works very well on this shot. I don't think it would have worked as well on the shot with guy with the gold jacket, because then it would have picked out bits of the wall, and I think we would have spent more time erasing than just doing a quick mask like we did. But both methods work very nicely. Okay, so that's very simple, really. Just the only thing, as I said, you might want to do is that sneaky trick of refining the mask afterwards, just to give you a better quality mask. Now, it's not a tool I use a great deal, but it's nice to know it's there. All right, to finish, let's go back to our surfy dude and then finish off by very quickly talking about color grading, which is another tool that any of you can use easily as well. Like the skin tone adjustment tool, the color balance tool doesn't require you to have any massive knowledge about mixing colors, so A plus B color equals C or whatever. This is really a what you see is what you get experience. So that's super simple. The way the color balance tool works is that it's divided up into either splitting the photo into shadows, midtones, highlights, so 3 different zones, or you can affect the master, which will affect the entire photo. So playing with this control is just like putting a filter in front of the lens of a certain color. So if I grab up my central circle and push it all the way to the edge, helps if you are on the background, push it all the way to the edge, then it will add that color tint to the photo. The further out to the edge you go, the stronger it is. If I go in this direction, then we're going to go teal, cold tones, purples, reds, green, and so on. So the further you go, the stronger it gets. So overall, I would like this photo to be a bit warmer and do this, like so. However, to give us even more control, I'm going to reset that, and we're going to do this on a layer as well. So this was his skin tone. So always name your layers, kids, so you know what's going on. And we're going to make a new field adjustment layer which is our color grading layer, Col G, like so. So as I said, this is a filled layer, so if I press M on my keyboard, you can see it's covering the whole shot. Why do I want to do this? Because not only can we use the color balance tool, we could include a few other tools as well. So I said I wanted it to be a bit warmer overall, so let's do that. Now 3 ways, shadow, midtone, highlights. These are exactly the same controls, just represented bigger. So you can get finer control. You can also make the tool bigger if you wish. So I'm going to go for colder shadows, and let's have warm back up the midtones and the highlights a bit as well. And the slider on the right hand side gives us some density control, which is almost like a contrast adjustment. So I'm going to pull down the blacks a bit and brighten up the midtones. Now all of that, let's just put you away for a second in the right spot. Now all of that is now cleverly on a layer. So if I turn off color grading, that's before and that's after. And if I feel it's too strong, then we can dial back the opacity to where it was the right balance. And we could also introduce something else. So if I wanted to have muter colored tones, then I could pull saturation down, something like that. Then I might make that a bit stronger and so on. And then we can balance out exactly how much we want to have. So I'm going to settle with something like that. So putting it on a layer, more control, gives you the ability to add in other adjustments too. Let's just see it before and after. So that's how it came out of camera, and then that's with our color tweaking, grading and so on. And then that always gives you an opportunity to think I've done a bit too much. So I'm going to pull that back. Pat B says, so no color replacement. You can do the color replacement. It's just a little bit more laborious, but it's possible. So let's say we wanted to change the color of the surfboard. So let's make a new layer and call that board, like so. Grab a brush, check our adjustments, full opacity and flow. Not going to do anything massively fancy for this, so roughly just gonna mask in the board. The edge might be a bit hard. Let's just see if it looks bad or not. Go to our color editor. Let's pull this back out, go to advanced, pick our surfboard, and then maximum hue left or right, whatever you fancy. And then if you want to go further, you can just pick again. So if I just keep adding 30 points of hue, gradually we're going to walk our way around the circle, and then we can arrive at any color our heart desires. So it's a bit of a hack and slightly clunky, but it is possible to change the color from something from A to B. But the caveat is you have to start off with at least some color tone that Capture One can pick up. If it was a gray box, gray pair of trousers or whatever, then there's not enough color information there to transform into something else. So you can do it if there is a relatively dominant color there in the first place, and then it is possible. But if it's something low saturation like this ground sheet in the back or whatever, it would be quite difficult. So again, if we turn board on and off, then we've switched our color out like so. If we look at the edge, normally get a pretty good result. So where's my mask? So I missed a little bit the surfboard there, but in terms of the quality of the color change, generally works quite nicely. So it is possible, but it's not what the color editor was designed to do. So it is a little bit of a hack, but it's good to use sometimes. Great. I think we pretty much covered everything off, unless I forgot something. Just to finish off with color grading, next Tuesday, let's just bring up the YouTube channel for a second. And then it'll be easier to show you rather than try and describing about it. So if I just pull out our YouTube channel on screen so you can see it. Scroll down to, where are we? Quick live sessions. So color grading with Zoe Noble. If you don't know Zoe, she's a friend of the house, very good at Capture One, does her own educational content like Paul does as well. She's going to go through a couple of shots, 1 or 2, and just do some color grading on it as well. Now she's a hell of a lot better than me at color grading, so you might pick up some more tips. Also, if you watch last Tuesday's session, oh look at that, we get a preview now. Haven't seen that before. That's fun. So if you watched last Tuesday's session, or just a few days ago, Emily ran through a few edits and also did some color grading as well. So that gives you the chance to see a couple of other different people going about it as well. What Emily does with her color grading, which is a slightly different technique, is that she tends to like to go to the extremes to see, does this work for the photo? So does it nice, look good having warm shadows? Actually does. And then dials back the saturation by using the slider on the right hand side. So she gets the color tone she wants first and then pulls it back with the slider till it's the acceptable amount. So that's another technique you can pick up as well. Alex says it would be nice if you could change the hue not only by plus 30 degrees. It would be nice. We've discussed that many times. Apparently it's not as easy as you would think. So I can't tell you why, one of those weird R&D engineering things, but apparently it's not as easy as one would think, but it could be interesting for sure. Okay, also in terms of what's coming up, next Thursday, that was also on the YouTube channel, you can also see that. It's another webinar, so you can watch on YouTube, you can sign up and sit in the webinar room as well, if you like. Benefit of doing that, then you of course get the reminders, calendar entry and all that fun stuff to make sure you attend. And there's also a session in the morning we do for the webinars too. So if this time isn't the best time, then webinars also play out in the morning as well on YouTube, just in the afternoon. So do come back next week for working with layers. So if the layer stuff was a little bit intimidating today and you're not quite sure what you're doing with layers, then just join next week and then we shall cover all of that. We can talk about dodging and burning. We can talk about in relation to color again, all kinds of fun stuff that you can do with layers, gradients, radial stuff, and so on. Last question from Bill. Can you use the individual channels and levels to change the color? You can. I probably wouldn't. If you wanted to go down that method, I would use curves because you'll get more control. But Bill, if you want to do that, then you have to know a little bit about color mixing. And the disadvantage of using curves is that when you pull a curve, not only are you changing color, you're also changing density. You can't unlock the two. So you have to be quite skillful in your use of curves. Using the color balance tool, color is totally separate from luminosity. So I can change the color, I can change the tone without accepting the other. So the old school way to do it is using curves, but it gives you a different look to using the color balance tool. For ease and simplicity, I would steer you towards the curves tool. Okay, that's bang on our time. So thanks for joining us today. Hope to see you next week, whether that's here on YouTube, Facebook, or with Zoe, or anyone else who's coming up in February and March. Alrighty, take care everyone and see you all soon. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe on YouTube if you haven't, because that way you will get a notification. So do that and click the little bell next to it, and then you always know when we're going to go live. You get a notification 30 minutes beforehand, YouTube does send you, and also when we go live as well. So it's worth doing that. Now I'm going to say goodbye. Take care everyone and see you soon. Bye now.